He proposed on a Tuesday. The police arrested him on a Wednesday. And you found out who he actually was on a Thursday morning, sitting in your kitchen in Shibuya, drinking coffee that had gone cold, reading a government file that had your husband's face on the cover and the words "Most Wanted" printed in red across the top. In 3 languages. Red is such an aggressive color for a Thursday morning. Let's go back. Because you didn't just wake up one day and accidentally marry Japan's most wanted man. You are smarter than that. You have a master's degree. You have 3 years of Tokyo living under your belt. You speak Japanese well enough to argue with your landlord and win. But love, as it turns out, has absolutely no respect for credentials. His name was Hiroto Sato. His name is Hiroto Sato. Because he is very much alive. Inconveniently, spectacularly, infuriatingly alive, which is the whole problem. You met him the way you meet all the wrong people. At exactly the right moment. You are 28 years old and 3 weeks into the worst job transition of your career. You were a financial crimes analyst at a consulting firm in New York. Past tense. Because your firm got acquired, your department got restructured, which is corporate for evaporated, and you had exactly 2 options. Go home to Cleveland where your mother would ask about your timeline every 48 hours like a human alarm clock set specifically to your anxiety. Or accept the Tokyo transfer that your company had been dangling for a year and that you had been professionally declining because Tokyo felt permanent and permanent felt terrifying.
Cleveland.
Tokyo.
Cleveland.
Tokyo. You chose Tokyo. Specifically, you chose Tokyo because at least in Tokyo nobody would ask about your timeline in a language you fully understood. You land in October. You find an apartment in Shibuya, a clean, overpriced box with a window that faces another building's window and a neighbor who plays the same 4-note piano melody every single morning at 6 a.m. like he is personally rehearsing for the apocalypse. The apartment is fine. Your life is fine. Fine is the word you use when you have too much self-awareness to say good and too much pride to say bad. You start the new job. Financial forensics for a Tokyo-based international auditing firm. You look at numbers all day and find the places where the numbers are lying. You are exceptional at this. You know what fraud smells like from the spreadsheet. You have spent 4 years developing a nose for the exact texture of money that doesn't want to be found. The irony of this will hit you later. Much, much later. At exactly 3 a.m. on a Thursday morning. You meet Hiroto Sato at a corporate networking event in Roppongi that you did not want to attend. That's the origin story. A networking event. In Roppongi. The most aggressively unromantic location in Tokyo. A room full of people in business attire, holding wine glasses and performing professional ambition at each other, like it's a competitive sport with prizes nobody actually wants. You are in the corner near the window because you have been to enough of these events to know that the window corner is where the interesting people go when they've also realized they don't want to be there. It's like the introvert section. You and the window. A glass of wine that is doing nothing for you. The Tokyo skyline doing considerably more. Then someone stands next to you. You don't look immediately because in the window corner, you have an unspoken agreement with other window corner people that you respect each other's need to stare at the city in peace. He respects the agreement for about 40 seconds. Then he says, in English, perfect English, the English of someone who learned it deliberately rather than accidentally. The view is better from here than from anywhere else in the room because from here, you can pretend you're not in the room. You say, that's exactly why I'm here. He says, me too. You look at him for the first time. Here is the thing about Hiroto Sato that nobody tells you in the government file. The government file has his photograph. His face. Angular, precise, dark eyes, the controlled stillness of someone who has learned to be still because stillness is power in the rooms he operates in. Objectively, extremely good-looking. The file notes this nowhere. The file is, frankly, unprofessional in its failure to mention this. What the file also doesn't mention, he has a specific way of listening that makes you feel like the only person generating interesting information in a 20-meter radius. He has a dry sense of humor that arrives so quietly you almost miss it, and then you miss everything else because you're still laughing internally at the thing he said 6 sentences ago. He knows Tokyo the way people know things that were built into their bones. Not tourist Tokyo, not expat bubble Tokyo, the actual city, the one underneath, the one that moves on different tracks than the one in the guidebooks. And he asks you questions. Real ones. Not what do you do questions, what do you think questions, what do you notice questions. The kind of questions that only get asked by people who are genuinely curious about the answers. You talk for 2 hours. You miss the entire networking event. You do not notice that you miss the entire networking event. You also do not notice, and this is the part that will haunt you at 3 a.m., that he never once answers a what do you do question directly. That every time the conversation moves towards specifics about his work, it moves somewhere else with such smooth efficiency that you're talking about something else before you register the pivot. You have spent 4 years finding the places where numbers don't want to be found. You completely miss the places where this man doesn't want to be found, because you are too busy being fascinated by him, which is, of course, entirely the point. 7 months. 7 months of Hiroto Sato. Let's be specific about what those 7 months contained, because you deserve the full accounting of exactly how comprehensively you were not paying attention. Month 1. Coffee in Daikanyama at a cafe where he knows the owner, dinner in a tiny Nakameguro restaurant that has no sign, and food so extraordinary you cry a little at the tuna, and a very specific realization that this man is, and you write this in your journal, actual words, actual journal, you have it, it exists as evidence against you, the most grounded person I've met in Tokyo. Grounded. You wrote that. About a man whose face is currently on a government file. Month 2. He takes you to a jazz bar in Shimokitazawa where the owner plays Thursday nights, and Haruto knows every song by name. He helps you carry groceries from the Shibuya market. He remembers, on your 4th date, something small you mentioned on your 1st date and asks about it, and the specific quality of being remembered by someone who listens like he listens is so unusual that you go home and sit on the floor of your apartment for 10 minutes just processing the experience of being paid full attention. Month 3. You meet his friend Koji. Koji is, how do you describe Koji? Koji is 34 years old and has the specific energy of a man who has survived several things he will never fully enumerate and has decided that the correct response to survival is being aggressively funny about everything at all times. He has a laugh that takes up approximately 30% more room than the space he's in. He calls you the American for 6 weeks, not rudely, as if it is simply the most accurate and efficient descriptor available, which, technically, it is. Koji thinks Haruto is too serious. He says this directly to you, at dinner, with Haruto present, gesturing at Haruto with his chopsticks. Too serious. Since he was 18. Born serious. I've seen him smile 11 times. I keep a list. Haruto says, the list is inaccurate. Koji says, I have sources. You are laughing. Haruto is not laughing, but his eyes are doing the thing they do when he's internally laughing and has decided not to give Koji the satisfaction. You file this moment in the same place you file all the Haruto moments, somewhere warm and specific and yours. What you do not file. The way Koji's laughter, when Haruto's phone buzzes twice, stops. Just for a second. Just a single beat where Koji's expression goes somewhere neutral before returning to 60% of its previous wattage. It is the fastest emotional reset you have ever almost noticed. Almost. Month 4. You tell your mother about him. This is a significant escalation in your personal emotional accounting system. Your mother, who lives in Cleveland, who has the timeline alarm, who once told you that your standards were architectural, meaning they were so high they were structurally impractical. Your mother hears he's Japanese, he's private, he works in finance, and says, what kind of finance? And you say, various interests. And your mother says, that's what they say when they don't want to say. And you say, Mom. And she says nothing else, but the nothing has a specific shape that you choose to ignore because it's your mother and she has trust issues, and you are not your mother. You are absolutely your mother. Month 5. He meets your coworker Priya. Priya is your closest friend in Tokyo. Priya is 30 years old, originally from Mumbai, works in compliance at your firm, which means her entire professional existence is about detecting when people are not following rules, and Priya has what she calls her fraud face, which is the expression she gets when something doesn't add up. She has deployed it exactly 12 times in the 3 years you've known her, and she has been correct all 12 times. When you introduce her to Haruto at drinks in Ginza, Priya is perfectly warm, perfectly polite, and perfectly enjoyable for 2.5 hours. On the train home, she says, "He's very good." You say, "I know, right?" She says, "No. I mean he's very good at something specific that I can't identify yet." You say, "Priya." She says, "I'm not saying anything negative. I'm saying he's skilled at a thing." You say, "Everyone is skilled at things." She says, "Not like this." You go home, and you lie on your couch and you stare at the ceiling for 20 minutes, and then you get up and make tea and go to bed because Priya's fraud face has never once been wrong, and you are choosing, consciously, explicitly, in full awareness, to file this under "not my problem right now." This is a decision you will revisit. Month 6, the proposal. It's a Tuesday. You are in his apartment in Minami Oima, the first time you have been to his apartment, which now strikes you as both intimate and, in retrospect, extremely calculated timing. The apartment is clean, spare, thoughtfully arranged. Bookshelves that are not decorative. A specific kind of order that comes from someone who has reasons for knowing where everything is at all times. You don't notice any of this at the time because you are noticing him, which is the recurring problem. He makes dinner. The man can cook, genuinely, with a focused precision he brings to everything, and after dinner he sits across from you at the kitchen table, and he puts a small box on the table and he says, "I need to ask you something." And the ring is extraordinary. Simple and specific and chosen by someone who paid attention. And he says, "I want you to stay in Tokyo.
Permanently.
With me. As a reason you can't talk yourself out of." And you say yes. You say yes immediately, without pausing, without the careful analytical framework you apply to every other decision in your professional and personal life. You say yes because 7 months of this man have built a case so complete that your professional-grade pattern recognition system has, apparently, gone entirely offline in his specific direction. Reader, the pattern was there. You just weren't reading it. Wednesday. The police come at 7 a.m. Not the regular kind. Not 2 officers with a polite knock. The organized kind, 6 men, 2 vehicles, the specific quiet efficiency of people executing a plan that has been prepared for longer than your relationship has existed. They know the layout of the building. They know which apartment. They know his name. You are at his apartment. You stayed the night. You are in the kitchen in his gray sweater making coffee while he showers and thinking about the ring on your hand and whether to call your mother first or Priya first when you tell them. The knock on the door has a specific quality. You open it. 6 men. One of them says in Japanese, very formally, "We are looking for Haruto Sato." And you say, in Japanese, very stupidly because your brain has not yet caught up with the door, "He's in the shower." Which is how you accidentally assist in the arrest of your fiancé. You're welcome, Japan. Here is what happens in the next 4 hours in order. They take him. He walks out in handcuffs with a specific expression of a man who is not surprised and is not going to perform surprise for anyone. He looks at you, just once at the door, and his expression says 2 things simultaneously. "I'm sorry, and this is not finished." You receive both messages, and you don't know what to do with either of them. They leave you a card. A government card. An officer who speaks English introduces himself as Agent Mori, Financial Crimes Unit, National Police Agency. He says you are not under investigation. He says this with the specific tone of someone who means not yet. He gives you a number to call if you have questions. You sit on the floor of the apartment. You call Priya. She picks up on the second ring, and before you can say anything she says, "I knew it." You say, "Please don't." She says, "I'm coming over." You say, "I'm at his apartment." She says, "I'm still coming over." She arrives in 40 minutes with 2 coffees and her laptop and the expression of a woman who has been preparing for this conversation for 2 months and is going to be as kind as possible while being completely right. She opens her laptop. She has a file. Not the government file, her own file. Priya from compliance has been running her own quiet background investigation on Haruto Sato since the night in Ginza, when she said he was very good at something specific. She turns the laptop toward you. You look at it. You look at it for a long time. Haruto Sato, 34, Osaka-born. Former legitimate financial consultant. Emphasis on former. For the last 6 years, the primary architect of the most sophisticated financial fraud network operating in Japan. Ghost companies, layered accounts, laundered money moving through shell corporations in patterns so intricate they look like legitimate investment structures from every angle except the correct one. The figure at the bottom of the page. You look at it. The money, he has moved. The number has 9 digits.
9.
You say, he told me he worked in finance. Priya says, he does work in finance. You say, Priya. She says, I know. You say, I'm a financial crimes analyst. She says, I know. You sit there. The coffee goes cold. You look at the ring. Somewhere in Tokyo, in a government facility you don't know the address of, Hiroto Sato is presumably sitting in a room that is nothing like his kitchen, being asked questions by people whose job is finding the places where money doesn't want to be found. Your job. He proposed to a financial crimes analyst. You need a moment. Take the moment. Okay. Thursday morning. You are back in your apartment. Your apartment, not his. The government file, which Agent Mori, in a move of either enormous courtesy or strategic calculation, had delivered to you the previous afternoon with a note that says, for your awareness, is on your kitchen table. Your coffee is cold. You have read the file 3 times. Here is what the file tells you about Hiroto Sato that 7 months of being in love with him did not. He built the network over 6 years from a single legitimate consultancy. He was not born into crime. He constructed it deliberately with the specific engineering precision of someone who had decided that the financial system was a game with different rules for different players, and he was going to learn the real rules. He never used violence. He never threatened anyone. He moved money, other people's money, specifically money belonging to people and organizations whose relationship with legitimate accounting was already questionable, and he moved it in ways that made it look like something else. He was, the file notes, almost impossible to catch because he understood financial forensics better than most financial forensic investigators. You read that line twice. He understood financial forensics better than most financial forensic investigators. You are a financial forensic investigator. You put your face in your hands. The file also contains, and this is the part you read 4 times, a section on known associates. Koji is in it. Koji, who called you the American, who has been aggressively funny at every dinner, who counts Hiroto's smiles. Koji is in the file. Not as a suspect. As an intelligence asset. A man who has been cooperating with the Financial Crimes Unit for 14 months. The laughter that stopped for 1 beat when the phone buzzed. Koji knew. Koji knew everything. You stare at the ceiling for a while. Your phone buzzes. Unknown number. You answer because at this point, what else is there? It's Hiroto. He has allowed 1 call. He used it on you. He says, are you okay? You say, am I okay? He says, I know that's. You say, are you seriously asking me if I'm okay? You are in police custody. For fraud. You proposed to me yesterday. I accidentally helped them arrest you by telling them you were in the shower. You're asking if I'm okay. Silence. You say, the ring is still on my hand. Silence. He says, I know. You say, I haven't decided what that means yet. He says, I know. You say, you knew who I was. What I do. You knew from the beginning. Silence that is itself a yes. You say, why? He says, and his voice has a quality you have not heard in 7 months, something stripped of the precision, the control, the careful construction of everything he presents. Because you are the first person in 4 years who talked to me like I was a person and not a position. And I should have walked away from the window, and I didn't. You sit with that for a very long time. The window corner. The networking event. The introvert section. He chose you, and he shouldn't have, and he did it anyway. You say, you have very bad timing. He says, I know. You say, we're going to have a very long conversation when you get out. And then, because you are the woman who chose Tokyo over Cleveland, who looked back at the networking event, who said yes before she finished thinking, you say, don't talk to them without a lawyer. He says, already have one. Of course he does. You hang up. You look at the ring. You look at the file. You look at the cold coffee. Outside, Tokyo is doing what Tokyo does, moving, precise, 14 million people, none of them required to notice your specific crisis. The piano neighbor is playing his 4 notes. 6 a.m. end of the world rehearsal, same as always. You pick up the coffee anyway. You drink the cold coffee. You look at the ring one more time. You do not take it off. Here is what you know. You are a financial crimes analyst who fell in love with a financial criminal. This is either the most ironic thing that has ever happened to anyone, or it's completely on brand for a woman who has always been drawn to exactly the things she's supposed to be looking for professionally. You're still deciding. You know that Priya was right. You know that your mother was right. You know that somewhere in a government facility, Koji, who you thought was just the funny friend, has been talking to people with badges for 14 months about the man you are currently wearing a ring for. You know that Hiroto Sato is the most wanted man in Tokyo. You know that he built something that 9-digit number confirms. You know that he understood financial forensics better than most financial forensic investigators, and he spent 7 months across from one and said nothing. You also know that he used his one call on you. That he asked if you were okay. That when his voice lost its precision for the first time in 7 months, it was because he was telling you that you were the first person who talked to him like a person. You know that the ring is still on your hand. You know that the long conversation hasn't happened yet. And you know, because you're a financial crimes analyst who finds the places where things don't want to be found, that the story you have just been told by a government file is a story about money and law and systems. The story you are actually in is different. The story you are actually in has a window corner in Roppongi and a man who remembered things he said in passing, and a ring chosen by someone paying full attention, and a 4-note piano at 6 a.m. and Koji counting 11 smiles on a list, and cold coffee on a Thursday morning, and a woman sitting at a kitchen table in Shibuya who has not taken the ring off. Not yet. Possibly not ever. She hasn't decided. She's still working the case.